Hey guys, welcome to Rihanna's Lens, where I interact with you about the components in the STEM field and introduce you to fascinating people who passionately inhabit the scientific and technical frontiers of our society. My name is Rihanna Malhotra, and I'm absolutely elated to share this podcast with all of you. On this episode, I'm joined by a research laboratory technician with an undergraduate degree in biomedical science and a master's degree in cancer biology. Outside of her job, she runs a school club for young girls aged 7 to 10 and is also a telephone befriender for her patients going through the cancer treatment. I'm so glad to welcome and introduce Holly. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to begin our discussion.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So your job seems so interesting, and everything outside of your job as well. It's so enticing to hear about. So firstly, I wanted to know what exactly is it that motivated you to get into this field?
I think from a really early age, I've been really fascinated by the human body. So naturally, I kind of just gravitated towards the sciences. So at school, I did biology and chemistry for my what we call A levels here in the UK, and really just wanted to take that further and do a biomedical degree. Initially, I wanted to be a doctor. I was really enthusiastic about really helping people get through really challenging times, and I volunteered as a first aider as well. So yeah, it kind of all just seemed quite like a natural progression to go from the sciences at school into STEM. But more specifically, becoming a cancer researcher became a goal of mine when I was doing my undergrad research, and when I was learning about how our immune systems in particular can fight cancer. And so I decided to, after getting my degree in biomedical science, do a master's in research. And yeah, it just led to the opportunity to come back to Scotland, where I was born, and work as a lab technician, which I do now.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So it's great that you followed your passion that you always had, and you were always interested in the STEM fields and particularly in the medical field. So how does a biomedical science differ from your cancer biology that you're doing currently? And was it a big transition, or was it something that was incorporated in this field already?
So I think my experience of studying biomedical science was quite different from what I'm doing now, purely because it was quite broad. I learned a lot about all of the molecular biology, the physiology, the biochemistry of the body, and obviously now I'm obviously more focused on just cancer as a group of diseases. So it's interesting that, you know, I didn't really, as I said, I didn't really see myself going into cancer from the start. I was more interested in medicine and pharmacology, which is what my degree specialized in. But I think it's been helpful to get that kind of wider understanding of the human body before then deciding to work in cancer research. So I think really that's what doing a broader degree in biomedical sciences has given me, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. So there are a lot of fields like biomedical science, there's one that's biomedical engineering. So how is that different from the course that you studied in your undergraduate?
To be honest, I think it's just probably we did a little bit of, as I say, we did a little bit of everything. I'm not entirely sure how perhaps pursuing a career in bioengineering would be compared to what I do now. I think it's just a case of following, for me anyway, it was just a case of following my interest, and my interest was in is still in research, perhaps instead of maybe industry, which bioengineering might lend itself to more frequently. So it's hard to know, I suppose, what that would be like, having not done it. But I think it's nice that there's so many options for people who study, who choose to study science at a higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. Like STEM has so much to offer. It's in the name itself, science, technology, engineering, and maths. There's so many fields that you can get into just from getting into these STEM fields. And science itself, it's so vast. There's so much to offer. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And now that you're a research laboratory technician, so what's your role in your job? So what do you focus on as doing a cancer biology research? Like, what do you do in your job?
Yeah, so the job of a lab technician is quite a varied one. So it's hard to really define it. It depends kind of what lab you're in. My lab is particularly interested in spatial biology. So for those who might not know what that is, that's looking at, I suppose, just the architecture of cancer, and how different areas of the cancer have different cells in them. And this is particularly important because one of the challenges in cancer, of treating cancer, is that it's not just one cell type, it's a lot of cell types. And that can really impact how a patient responds to chemotherapy, for example. So it's a real barrier in cancer science that actually we really need to overcome. And so my lab is particularly interested in looking at the different molecular landscape, molecular biology landscape of patient human cancers, in particular in pancreatic cancer, in order to really understand the physical and, for example, molecular barriers that might be prohibiting the chemotherapy from working, essentially. So that's what I am very heavily involved with, is really just getting these new technologies, I suppose, because this is quite a novel field, getting these new technologies up and running at my university with alongside lots of other groups. So it's quite a diverse role. I think that's what I particularly enjoy about being a lab technician.
Oh, okay. So since you work a lot with technology, what's something that you have seen over time and something that has developed in your lab that it's really interesting to look at or use being a lab technician?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really difficult question, I suppose, because I haven't been a researcher for that long myself. I suppose technology is advancing all the time. So I think it's really cool, particularly from what we do, being able to get this molecular biology from really old samples, for example. That was always a challenge within the field of cancer research, and now we've learned so much about how we can use samples, for example, that have been preserved in wax, which is what we use in our lab, and how we can still take the genetic material out from that, even though it's quite, for example, it's quite broken up, it's quite degraded. And so I think that's pretty cool that technology has been able to to be able to kind of unlock this new potential, and then obviously overcome these challenges that we've had in research, such as the fact that often, previously researchers have had to use very fresh tissue, for example, which comes with challenge, and now it's opened up this whole library of material that we can interrogate and look at and find out more about human diseases. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it does sound so fascinating, and just working with technology, and if you're going to stay, like, do the same research laboratory technician work, I'm sure you'll be able to see a lot of more interesting things that will come along the years, because we're just developing so fast these days. And especially I feel like during the pandemic, we just found different ways of doing things that we did offline before. So we've just
Oh yeah,
started developing even more during this entire time.
yeah, definitely. It's been a challenge trying to keep the research going in the pandemic, but it's definitely highlighted how how amazing it is when all of the scientists and the technologies come together, and how fast we can turn things around if the world needs us to.
Yeah, definitely. And are there any projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, so another great aspect of being a lab technician is I'm involved with a few different projects at the same time. All of the projects I'm involved with are interested in doing spatial biology, but across different diseases. So I suppose not only do we work with cancer tissues, but we also are doing some work, for example, in vasculitis. So that's basically a project where we're taking biopsies of people's blood vessels, and we're doing molecular biology on those, which is really fascinating. It obviously brings a lot of challenge because these samples are absolutely tiny. But we, as part of the protocol, we have to use what we call immunofluorescent staining, so that we can identify different types of cell. And I've never really, until I've done this job, I never really did much of what we call MIF, multiplex immunofluorescence. And so learning to do that in lots of different tissue types, it's fascinating. And it's really nice to be able to work with different groups and learn a lot of different skills from all of the people that I work with. So yeah.
Wow, yeah, it's yeah, your job definitely sounds so great. And outside your job, you also do volunteering, like you're a telephone befriender for patients that are going through cancer treatment. So, what made you get into that? Was there any life experience that motivated you to be a befriender for the cancer patients?
I think my main motivation for that was that, you know, as a researcher, you're in theory, you're aware of all of the challenges that cancer patients have and they go through, and you're aware of the aggressive nature of the treatments that they have. But actually, you're quite removed from the patients themselves. And so I think my motivation to become a befriender was just to kind of understand, hear firsthand how these patients get on, and really understand the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. I think I find it really rewarding. I think like a lot of people that come into research, we all want to make a difference in our field. We all want to improve the health of people around the world. But obviously it's less of a clinical role a lot of the time. So I think the nice thing about being a befriender as well as a cancer researcher is that you see both sides. And I think it's been really rewarding for me. It's been a really big part of my motivation when, for example, I have a hard day in the lab. I think, right, I know why I'm doing this. I know what I want to I know what kind of difference I want to make. I really want to improve these people's lives. And so I think it's just been quite a natural role to fall into, and I've really enjoyed it, even though it's been exceedingly challenging. Because yeah, it's a hard to challenging disease to always be confronted with, I suppose. But it's very rewarding to be a befriender. Certainly something I would recommend if anybody gets the chance.
Right, definitely. I'm sure it must also be heartwarming to hear their experiences, or if someone's their cancer treatment is successful. and you've spoken with that person, I'm sure that must be great for you, and it also gives you an incentive to work harder for your degree in your cancer biology. It's definitely an incentive for you to work harder in your field, because you hear those first-hand stories, and you feel like that you feel bad for the people that are going through this, because as you said, it's a tough process going through this cancer treatment. So it just gives you more of an incentive to work harder. So I think this is great what you're doing.
Oh yeah, no, it's really good. It's really it's really rewarding. It definitely reminds me why I wanted to do research in the first place, and why I was interested in biomedicine. So
yeah, absolutely. So has there been any favorite experience of yours while you were talking to any of the cancer patients?
I'd say it's just obviously there are days when I speak to them. I speak to one lady once a week, and because of COVID, it's obviously not face to face. I've never met her. So there are days when, of course, she's having a really tough time, but then there are also days when we just have a real good laugh for half an hour, and it really picks me up as much as it picks her up. We'll be talking about something funny we saw on TV, or a nice meal that she had, and these sorts of moments where you get to really connect with these people that in the back of your mind you're always like, they're going through a lot, and yet they're able to see all that kind of life has to offer, all of the small things, and it reminds you that there's a lot of positivity around if you look hard enough. So I think it's just nice to have that continual reminder, and so there's not particularly one experience which stands out, but the whole opportunity to give somebody that support is an experience that I really value, and hopefully make a difference through to that one person.
Yeah, definitely. This is so wholesome to hear about. And I'm sure even the cancer patient that you must be talking to, they might be feeling so good that you're taking out your time to talk to them and just crack some jokes, or just talk about your daily work maybe, so that they can they hear about other things other than just cancer. Because most of the times these cancer patients, um, the cancer, the disease that they have, that becomes the main center of attention, other than other things about their personality. So it's great that when you're talking to them, you're like a friend to them. Like, you talk to them about different things other than just concentrating on their cancer. So I think that's just great.
Yeah, no, it's really lovely, really lovely to have that outlet.
Yeah, definitely. And you also run a school club for young girls. So what is this club all about? What does it revolve around?
Yeah, so for any listeners that are in the UK, this is known as girl guiding. So I work with girls that are aged 7 to 10. It's also probably very similar to Scouts, if the listeners know what I'm referring to. But it's essentially an after school club for girls, and it's only girls, which I think is quite nice, because I think when growing up, girls tend to be slightly more self-cautious, and so to have a space that they feel like they can share, and that they can feel that they are welcome, is, I think, really, really important. I've always been very very passionate about, I suppose, supporting younger women, and I still am, especially in STEM. There's very much a need for encouraging young girls into science and technology, and so I think really doing this after school club, I suppose, allows me to interact with young people and to really understand maybe challenges facing them, as well as being able just to do fun activities. So, for example, we're doing a a Harry Potter badge at the moment, or a Harry Potter themed badge for the girls, and we were making butterbeer the other week. So it's quite a nice way of kind of doing these fun activities, getting kids more involved with science, or growing their confidence, and yeah, and gives me a creative outlet as well. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy doing, is really having to come up with games or puzzles or challenges for them. So it's nice as a young researcher to have that kind of balance, I think, between the work and just being quite playful. And so yeah, it's a lovely thing to do, just volunteer, and it also, I suppose, gets you to know the community a bit more. So that's been really good, because when I first started, I'd only just moved, so it was a case of also networking as well outside of STEM. So a lot of advantages to doing the volunteering have come from working with these girls, more than they know, I think.
Right, absolutely. And it's so important to advocate STEM to these young girls, like at the age of 7 to 10. Just building up that interest at such a young age, it's so essential, because I feel like there's a lot of misconception, at least through at the early age for kids, at least through cartoons or some other aspect, or just some from video games, that men are like the ones that are part of the STEM fields, and it's not for girls. So there's a lot of misconception about that, because even I have done a science club like this before, and I was really shocked to hear that not many people knew that, like when I asked them to describe what a scientist looks like or what they imagine a scientist to be, very few of them said women wearing a lab coat. Many of them said men wearing a lab coat. So I was really surprised about that. And so I think it's great that you're encouraging more girls to join the STEM field at such a young age, to let them know that there are so many fields for them to get into, and it's just not about men or boys to get into these fields.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, I speak to the girls about what I do all the time, of course, like on a more general level, being a scientist, but it's really interesting to have these conversations and the girls to say, you know, when I grow up, I want to do that too. It brings a lot of joy to my day. It makes my week, to be honest. So it's really nice to be able to be a role model for them.
Sure. I'm sure. And being a woman in STEM, have you faced any discrimination or any challenges?
I think I have been very lucky in that I haven't. I wouldn't say there's been any big challenges for me. However, I have grown up in quite an open community. I've had a very supportive network of my family and my friends. And also I've had very supportive mentors as well. My first supervisor was a woman, and she was very good at empowering me and giving me the knowledge base I needed to make my own decisions, for example, in the lab. And so I think in terms of just how I've come to be a woman in STEM, I think I've been quite lucky to have those role models. And in all, to be honest, in all the groups that I've worked in, there has been some very strong female characters, and that's been inspiring to me. And it still is inspiring whenever I'm, you know, watching a talk by a female professor, or I'm scrolling through Instagram and seeing all of the science communication by all of these incredible females in STEM. It always brings back that sort of motivation to keep going. And yeah, I hope that continues. I hope that just gets bigger and bigger, and we keep talking about it, because I think it's really important that we push for women getting into these top roles, such as being professors in their fields and getting PhD positions, etc. So Yeah, I think I've been lucky though, and I know that's still a barrier for a lot of people. So hopefully I can be a role model for anyone who's a bit unsure about whether they're going to pursue a career in STEM.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's amazing that you had these incredible, empowering women that you looked up to, and um, that's just something that bases your motivation rather than someone pulling you down. And I'm sure a lot of women face this, that they're being pulled down by a few people, that's not letting them go forward. So I feel like you are incredibly lucky that you didn't go through something like that. But for the women out there that go through these things, it is so important to have some empowering women that have your back, and they help people, that push you forward despite anything that other people say to pull you down.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's really vital that all of the women are all kind of backing each other up. I think that's a big thing for me, is women supporting women. So for sure, hope that I keep doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, what advice would you like to give to anyone that wants to join this same field as yours?
I think I would say go for it. Don't be put off by the challenges that will come your way. I think one of the things that I suppose is important for any career, but particularly being a young professional in STEM, is that, you know, failure and I suppose just feeling like you're not good enough is quite common. And I think when you have those feelings, my advice would be to talk about them, because I think that's one thing, particularly during my master's year. I found that very difficult for a few different reasons, but the one thing I didn't do was talk to people around me. And it turns out that a lot of them were feeling the same way. And so I think, as I say, I think it's important to build resilience and not to give up, but also to rely on those around you, because a lot of the time they'll have had a similar experience, or they'll have advice that they can give you, or just someone to talk through things with is invaluable when you're feeling a bit lost. So don't be afraid to ask other people for help. Would be my advice to anyone coming into STEM. It can be quite challenging, but it's really rewarding. So make sure you reach out if you're struggling.
Right, absolutely. That's some really incredible advice, and I'm sure that will be helpful to a lot of people that are listening. Well, that's it for today, Holly. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. I had a great time talking to you and getting to know your experiences and insights about your field and outside your job with being a telephone befriender and having a club for young girls. It was just amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope all your listeners enjoy hearing a bit from me.
Yeah, I'm sure. And to let all of you know, this podcast is now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all your listening platforms. Make sure you subscribe to all of them and stay tuned for more. Holly, is there anything you'd like to pitch before we log off?
Well, guys, if you're on Instagram and you liked what you heard, I am at mindfulscientist_. So I would love to have any questions or just hear from you, get any feedback. But thank you so much for having me on, Brianna. It's been a real pleasure. And best of luck to you, whatever you pursue in your career too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Make sure to check her out. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Good luck to you as well. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.